Hey friends, it's Kelly Thorngore. I am a life and a business coach and so passionate about helping you create a life you love. We have been going through a 40-day prayer challenge using Mark Batterson's book, Draw the Circle, and it's been incredible. So not only is this book just absolutely fantastic, and even if you've not been joining along with us, you want to get this devotional. This is my 20th time going through it, and I think it's the first time I've gone through it with a group of people. And so I'm loving getting to do this with all of you. So today is day 31, or excuse me, day 33. I just looked at that and still said the wrong thing. I'm so glad you're joining me, whether you're joining live or watching the recording. Day 33 is about the importance of having a prayer covering. So anytime we are starting something new, maybe it's a new job, maybe it's a new prayer journey like this 40-day prayer challenge, we need to make sure that people are praying for us, that they are covering us. And there's so many fantastic quotes and stories in today's devotional. So I want to touch on a couple of them and then talk about some other things as well. So one of the things that he talks about is, he says, if we are going to intercede for others, so in other words, if we're going to pray for others, we have to make sure there are people who are interceding for us, people who are praying for us. He said we need a prayer covering, especially when we hit an intense season of prayer and fasting. So many of us, that's exactly like what we've been going through in this 40-day challenge. Because he said, when we hit our knees, we pick a fight with the enemy, and the enemy will fight back. So I know some of you have been experiencing that, and we've certainly been experiencing that in my family as well, of just some intense spiritual warfare these last 30-something days. And thankfully, I do have a prayer covering and people who are praying. And I was just reminded, actually, I just saw Mitzi's comment, and Mitzi has actually, over the years of my journey with iBloom, been one of those prayer coverings. And what a huge blessing and timely prayers she has said. And so grateful for all the people who have been that prayer covering. And there's so many incredible stories in today's devotional. He goes on to say, the enemy will fight back. Make no mistake. There is a target on our back when we are praying. The enemy wants to take us out, but he can't touch us. He has no jurisdiction in our lives if we are covered by the blood of Jesus. So that just means if you are a follower of Jesus and you have accepted Jesus into your heart and you've asked him to be your savior, then you have protection from the enemy. Now, it doesn't mean the enemy can't still come after us and try to wreak havoc, but he can't have any victory because God already has the victory. So I will say, during this 40-day prayer challenge, I know of 7 women who have accepted Jesus for the very first time, which is just incredible. And so I want to take a moment and just pause here and say, if that is you, or if you don't know what it means to follow Jesus or to have accepted Jesus into your heart, will you send me a private message? Because I would love to connect with you and just introduce you to what it means to be a follower of Jesus, because I think sometimes that's sort of a Christianese, churchy language. And if you don't know what that means, I would love to tell you about it. So just celebrating, and I know all of you are celebrating too. This 40-day prayer challenge has been incredible. And just getting to lead a woman from Germany and Nairobi and all over the United States, 7 women have come to know Jesus through this 40-day prayer challenge. And so just celebrating from the mountaintops, these women who know and are starting to grow in their relationship with God. A couple of these women had never owned a Bible before. And I just think it's so incredible that I was going through this 40-day prayer challenge, and God nudged me to open it up wider. And it was because I believe He had a plan and a purpose for those women's lives, and also for each of your lives as well. And so it's been awesome to watch what God is doing. Okay, it says there will be times when we feel the enemy is launching a frontal assault on our family, our business, our church. That's when we need to stay on our knees and to pray through. And yes, these errands that they're chatting about in the text, the prayer warriors, he talks about how the footnotes. So you have the people who are on the front lines, and they are like the voice. So I think about like a Beth Moore, somebody who is like having a great impact. But then there are the footnotes. So there's the headline people and there's the footnotes. And the footnotes are the people behind the scenes. So Becky, this is in the devotional that they're talking about Aaron and Hur, and how they held up Moses's hands or arms in the battle. So when he would get weak, they were there holding him up. And that is the power of prayer. And that is the power of having prayer covering. So there are certain people who are called to more make the headlines. They're in the front, doing what appears to be the important work. And yet they're the people who, there's some footnotes, like people behind the scenes who are praying, and God is using them to have a significant impact. And so he talks several things through this. He said, spiritual battles are fought in the same way. The victory is won with knees bent in prayer and hands raised to worship. The enemy cannot be defeated any other way. The victory has been won apart from prayer and praise. We will have moments when we lack ability, strength, will, or faith to pray for ourselves. So there are going to be times, we talked about this yesterday, I think, that there are going to be seasons in our life where we don't even have the words to pray. It's almost as if groans are coming out. And it's important in those seasons that we reach out to people, that we ask them to pray, that we ask them to cover us in prayer, because that is the only way the enemy can be defeated. And in those moments where we feel just beaten down by life, it is so incredibly important that we are praying through, that we're not avoiding that time with God, that we're continuing to show up and we're continuing to seek Him for all the things. Okay, so I loved this story, and I want to just talk about it for just a minute. So he talked about how the day, so Walter Wink says, history belongs to the intercessors. I love this. So those are those footnotes he's talking about. So he talks about Charles Finney. He was one of the most famous evangelists of his generation. He made headlines during the Second Great Awakening. But there's a footnote in the story. Finney had his own Aaron, so his own person that was holding his arms up and helping him through these revivals. His name was Daniel Nash. At the age of 48, Father Nash quit his pastorate, so he quit being a pastor of a church, to devote himself to full-time intercession. So he was just going to follow Charles Finney around, and he was going to pray for him. I mean, what? He must have really believed in this man's mission. And what an incredible thing. He says several weeks before Finney would enter a city, Father Nash would rent a room. He would recruit 2 or 3 intercessors and begin laying a prayer foundation for the revival that would follow. So before hold on, I gotta get my names right here. So before Charles Finney would go into this city for a revival, Father Nash would show up, and he would gather 2 or 3 people. He would rent a room and he would start laying the foundation. So the victory was won long before the revival actually started. It says, by the time Finney showed up, the hard work was done. The victory had already been secured in the spiritual realm. Okay, I have to tell you this story because I think it's so great. He said during one of his revivals, Finney was contacted by a woman who ran a boarding house in town. She asked him, Brother Finney, do you know Father Nash? He and 2 other men have been in my boarding house for the last 3 days, but they haven't eaten a bite of food. I opened the door and peeped in at them because I could hear their groaning, and I saw them down on their faces. They have been this way for 3 days, laying prostrate on the floor and groaning. I thought something awful must have happened to them. I was afraid to go in, but I didn't know what to do. Let's see, hold on. Would you please come and see about them? Finney replied, no, that isn't necessary. They just have a spirit of travel and prayer. Okay, can you imagine? Like 3 days of them praying and fasting and seeking God and believing Him to show up before this revival. And so I love this so much because I think there are so many times we set out to do something and we try to do it in our own power. And we are missing the opportunity of having God go before us and lay the foundation. And so I would encourage you, if you don't have some friends that are covering you in prayer, start praying now that God will put those people in your life. And if He's already put those people in your life, can you go to them and ask them to pray? And then I would also encourage you to ask God to show you who are a couple of people that you are supposed to cover in prayer and to show up and do that. And I know that over the years, God has put different people to provide prayer covering for me. And it's amazing to me how God uses their words and their encouragement and their prayers at just the right moment. I remember there have been several times, I told you Mitzi for one season, who was doing this 40-day prayer challenge. She was doing prayer covering for me, and she would send me things at some of the darkest times when no one knew that I was struggling, and yet she covered me in prayer. And so God told her, and she knew, and she would reach out. And so I can't think of a better gift that we could give a friend. And so ask God to show you who are a couple of people that you are to provide prayer covering for. And then pray and ask God to show you and to intercede on your behalf to other people that you need their prayer covering. You may need to go and ask them, or maybe God will just nudge them all together. Okay, I love this. Last thing, he says, prayer is the pen that writes history. Don't worry about making headlines. Focus on the footnotes. And if you focus on the footnotes, God will write the headlines. This is powerful because we don't have to write the headlines. We can allow God to write the headlines and God to get the glory. And we can be the ones who are behind the scenes praying and seeking God and allowing Him to show up in incredible ways. All right. I hope you have an amazing Saturday. I will see you tomorrow.